year was 479 BCE. The Greek world trembled beneath the shadow of Persia's empire, the largest and most formidable force the ancient world had ever seen. Just 1 year before, the legendary stand at Thermopylae had become both a tragedy and an inspiration. 300 Spartans led by King Leonidas, along with a few thousand Greek allies, had fought to their last breath against an army said to number in the hundreds of thousands. Though the Persians triumphed that day, their victory came at a cost that would echo across the Greek world and ignite the fires of vengeance. This is the story of how 10,000 Spartans, joined by tens of thousands of Greeks from across the city-states, avenged Thermopylae at the Battle of Plataea, the final, decisive confrontation that ended Persia's invasion of Greece and changed the course of history. It all began with the smoldering ruins of Athens. After Thermopylae, Xerxes, the Persian king, marched his forces southward, burning the Greek heartland. His soldiers razed temples, looted sanctuaries, and destroyed the city that dared defy him. Athens fell, but her spirit did not. Themistocles, the brilliant Athenian admiral, had lured the Persian navy into the narrow straits of Salamis, where the smaller, more agile Greek ships turned the tide of battle. Xerxes, humiliated, withdrew most of his forces, leaving behind his trusted general Mardonius with a massive army to finish what he could not. And so, in the spring of 479 BCE, Greece prepared for one final stand, this time not in a narrow pass or on the sea, but on the open plains near the city of Plataea. It would be the largest land battle of the Persian Wars. Sparta took the lead. In the wake of Leonidas's death, the Spartan resolve hardened. King Pausanias, the regent for Leonidas's son, was chosen to lead the Greek forces. Under him stood 10,000 Spartan hoplites, the finest warriors in the ancient world, joined by contingents from Corinth, Megara, Tegea, and dozens of other city-states. In total, nearly 100,000 men assembled under the Greek banner, united not by empire but by freedom. On the opposite side, Mardonius commanded a Persian army that might have numbered 200,000. His troops included Persians, Medes, Bactrians, and even Greek allies who had turned against their homeland. The Persian camp stretched across the plains near the river Asopus, a sea of tents, banners, and cavalry. Mardonius was confident. He had the numbers, the archers, and the open terrain that suited his tactics. The Greeks, however, had something else: the unbreakable discipline of the phalanx and the memory of Thermopylae. When the two armies first faced each other, tension hung heavy in the air. Days turned into weeks as both sides maneuvered for advantage. Neither wanted to be the first to attack across unfavorable ground. The Persians relied on cavalry, while the Greeks sought higher terrain to defend from. Each morning, soldiers awoke to the sight of their enemies on the horizon, thousands of shields glinting in the sun, horses stamping in the dust, banners fluttering in the wind. The stalemate could not last forever. Persian cavalry raids began to harass the Greek lines, cutting off their water supplies and intercepting provisions. Mardonius sought to draw the Greeks down into the plain, where his cavalry could crush them. The Greeks, wary of being surrounded, retreated slightly during the night toward higher ground. But in the confusion of darkness, their lines broke apart. Some units became separated, while others lost communication entirely. When dawn came, Mardonius saw what he thought was a retreat, and he struck. With a thunder of hooves and the sound of war drums, the Persian army surged forward. Their cavalry led the charge, followed by waves of infantry, archers, spearmen, and the elite Persian immortals. Dust rose like smoke as tens of thousands advanced toward the disorganized Greek positions. But Pausanias did not panic. Rallying the Spartans, he ordered his men to hold formation. The phalanx, a wall of bronze shields and long spears, locked together like an iron gate. Every Spartan had trained his entire life for this moment. Behind them stood their allies, ready to fight not just for survival but for vengeance. The Persians struck first, their arrows darkening the sky. The Spartans lifted their shields, hearing the hiss of shafts glancing off bronze. Then came the crash of impact. Cavalry slamming into the shield wall, infantry rushing forward in a storm of noise and fury. For hours, the battle raged across the fields. Mardonius, wearing gleaming white armor and mounted on a tall horse, commanded from the front lines. He believed his men would break the Spartans as they had broken other armies before. But the Spartans stood firm. Inch by inch, they pushed forward. Their discipline and training began to tell. Spears thrust in unison, shields overlapped, and the Persian advance slowed. At the center of the chaos, Pausanias prayed to the gods, asking for their favor. When he received a favorable omen, he gave the order to advance. The Spartan line surged forward like a tide of bronze and blood. They struck the Persian center with unstoppable force. Mardonius tried to rally his troops, but at that crucial moment, a Spartan warrior hurled a stone that struck the Persian general's skull. Mardonius fell from his horse dead. When their commander died, the Persian ranks wavered, and then broke. Panic spread like wildfire. Soldiers threw down their weapons and fled toward their fortified camp. The Greeks pursued, shouting cries of vengeance for Leonidas and Thermopylae. The battle had turned. Inside the Persian camp, chaos reigned. Thousands of men, trapped behind walls meant to protect them, were cut down as the Greeks stormed through. The Athenians, furious over the burning of their city, fought with unmatched ferocity. The Spartans tore through the enemy ranks, their spears flashing in the sun. By the end of the day, the Persian army had ceased to exist as a fighting force. The plain of Plataea was littered with the fallen, Persians, Greeks, and allies alike. The air was thick with the smell of dust and death, but above it all the Greek banners flew high. The vengeance of Thermopylae had been fulfilled. King Leonidas had fallen defending Greece's freedom, and now, under Pausanias, his people had avenged him. The Persian dream of conquering Greece was shattered. As the sun set over the battlefield, the surviving Greeks gathered to give thanks to the gods and honor their dead. Among the Spartans, silence fell. They did not cheer or boast. They simply stood in their armor looking out over the plain, knowing they had done what honor demanded. The Battle of Plataea was not just a military victory, it was a defining moment for the Greek world. It proved that courage, unity, and discipline could stand against overwhelming power. It marked the end of Persia's invasions and the dawn of Greece's golden age. And though centuries would pass, the story of Plataea, the story of how 10,000 Spartans avenged Thermopylae, would echo forever as a testament to the unyielding spirit of freedom. The morning after Plataea was eerily quiet. The once living plains where tens of thousands had clashed in the fury of war now lay still, covered in broken spears, shattered shields, and the fallen from both sides. The Persians, once the masters of half the known world, had been utterly defeated by a coalition of free Greek states. King Pausanias, now the hero of Greece, ordered that the dead be honored according to custom. The Greek fallen were buried with ceremony, each city-state marking its own mound upon the field. But for the Persians, who had burned temples, defiled shrines, and enslaved countless people, there would be no grand memorials. Their dead would lie where they fell, a silent warning to all who sought to subjugate Greece. In Sparta, news of victory reached the people like a divine wind. The widows of Thermopylae wept, not with grief but with pride. Their husband's sacrifice had not been in vain. Across Greece, temples rang with offerings and prayers. Statues were raised to Zeus and Athena, thanking the gods for deliverance. Yet for the warriors who had fought at Plataea, celebration came with a heavy heart. They had seen comrades fall beside them, brothers in arms slain in the dust. For every victory there was a price, and the Spartans more than anyone understood the cost of freedom. Pausanias himself walked the battlefield long after the others had gone. He found the body of Mardonius, the man who had mocked the Greeks and promised their destruction. The Spartan king ordered that Mardonius's corpse be left unburied, a symbolic reversal of Persian arrogance. It was said that when the Persians had burned Athens, they left the dead dishonored in the streets. Now their own commander would share the same fate. As the smoke of victory rose into the sky, the Greek alliance turned its gaze eastward. Though Xerxes had fled back across the Hellespont, his fleet still threatened the Aegean. To secure their freedom once and for all, the Greeks knew they had to destroy the Persian navy and drive them out entirely. In the months following Plataea, the Athenians under Xanthippus launched a sea campaign that culminated in the Battle of Mycale, off the coast of Ionia. There, on the same day that Plataea had been fought, the Greeks annihilated the remaining Persian ships and set fire to their camp. It was as if the gods themselves had decreed that Greece's vengeance would be complete on land and sea alike. With those twin victories, Plataea and Mycale, the Persian invasion ended. The mightiest empire on earth had been humbled by a patchwork of small, fiercely independent city-states. But the legacy of Plataea went far beyond military triumph. It reshaped the Greek world forever. The victory gave Athens the confidence to rise as a maritime power, forming the Delian League to defend against future threats. Sparta, meanwhile, stood as the eternal symbol of martial discipline and courage. For a brief, shining moment, Greece stood united, not by conquest but by a shared belief in freedom. The Spartans who survived Plataea returned home as legends. Their sons and grandsons would grow up hearing the stories of Leonidas at Thermopylae and Pausanias at Plataea, stories that defined what it meant to be Spartan. They had faced the greatest army the world had ever seen, and prevailed not through numbers, but through will. Centuries later, historians like Herodotus and Plutarch would record their deeds, ensuring that the world would never forget. The names of those who stood at Plataea would echo through time. Aristodemus, who had survived Thermopylae and redeemed his honor in battle, Amphiaraus, who refused to retreat, and Pausanias, the man who led Greece to final victory. Yet history, as always, is written not only in triumph but also in shadow. For all his glory, Pausanias' later years were marked by tragedy. Power and pride would ultimately lead him to conflict with his own people, and the regent who had avenged Leonidas would die accused of treason. But that too was part of the human story, the price of greatness in a world that demanded humility from even its heroes. Still, nothing could erase what had been achieved on that fateful day. The Battle of Plataea ended the Persian dream of conquest and preserved the fragile spark of democracy and freedom that would one day light the Western world. When we speak of vengeance, we often think of anger and destruction, but the Spartans' vengeance was not born of hatred. It was born of duty. They fought not to destroy, but to defend something sacred, the right to live as free men, to govern themselves, to stand unbowed before any tyrant. In the generations that followed, artists, poets, and philosophers would look back on those days as the moment when Greece found its soul. The courage of the few had saved the many. The stand of Thermopylae and the victory of Plataea became twin symbols of what human resolve could achieve. Imagine for a moment the last light of day falling across the battlefield. The armor of fallen warriors gleams faintly in the sun. A Spartan stands amid the silence, his spear grounded, his eyes fixed on the horizon. He remembers the men who died at the hot gates, Leonidas, his comrades, his brothers, and he whispers a vow that their memory will never fade. That vow became the heart of Greek identity, the belief that freedom must be earned and defended, no matter the cost. The Persians would never again threaten mainland Greece. Their empire, vast as it was, began to decline, weakened by internal struggles and the unrelenting spirit of the peoples they sought to conquer. Meanwhile, Greece flourished. From the ashes of war rose the Parthenon, philosophy, drama, and art, the foundations of Western civilization. But behind all those achievements stood men who once fought on the plain of Plataea, men who knew the price of liberty. Their legacy was not just victory, it was endurance. And so, when we tell the story of the 10,000 Spartans who avenged Thermopylae, we are not just recounting a battle. We are remembering a moment when courage met destiny, when a handful of free men defied the greatest power on earth and won. This is not merely history. It is a reminder of what humanity is capable of when united by purpose and conviction. This was their vengeance. This was their victory. This was the Battle of Plataea. You've been watching Stories of Valor, where history lives and legends never die.